For nearly a century, Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow have stood larger than life, icons of rebellion, danger, romance, and ruthless ambition. Hollywood turned them into folk heroes, newspapers made them household names, and countless legends painted them as stylish bank robbers who outsmarted the law at every turn. But behind the photographs, behind the poems, and behind the myths lies a far darker story. One filled with grim realities, desperate choices, and a trail of destruction that America rarely talks about. In this video, we're going to peel back the curtain and reveal the horrible facts, the gritty, unsettling, and little-known truths that shaped the real Bonnie and Clyde. From the harsh realities of Depression-era survival to the deeper complexities of their relationship and the relentless pursuit that defined their final days, these are the stories history books often leave buried. If you love uncovering the real history behind America's most notorious outlaws, you're in the right place. Leave a comment about which outlaw you want to explore next, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more American Old West facts. The debut of Netflix, The Highwaymen, naturally raises a meaningful question. Who were Bonnie and Clyde in real life? Behind the myths and the Hollywood storytelling, the real journey of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow was shaped by hardship, ambition, and the unforgiving economic landscape of the early 1930s. Both young Texans, they entered adulthood at a time when the Great Depression was stripping away stability and opportunity for millions. Clyde Barrow, born in 1909, and Bonnie Parker, born in 1910, grew up in families that often struggled just to pay for basic necessities. This shared experience of scarcity created a bond between them, strengthening their connection shortly after they met in 1930. Their relationship wasn't just romantic. It was a partnership shaped by dreams of a life far beyond the ordinary. As unemployment soared and banks failed across the country, small-time theft and roadside robberies became, for them, a misguided path toward excitement, recognition, and financial relief. For young people who felt trapped by circumstances, the idea of traveling the open roads of the American Midwest held powerful appeal. Their journey took them from Texas to states as far north as Minnesota, catching the attention of the press everywhere they went. Photographs of Bonnie and Clyde, stylish, confident, and unafraid of being seen, circulated across the nation. Newspapers turned them into symbols of rebellion during an era when many Americans were deeply frustrated with financial institutions and government systems. This contributed to their reputation as romantic outlaws, even though their day-to-day life on the road was far more difficult than news headlines ever suggested. They slept in fields, abandoned farmhouses, and cheap motels, constantly moving from one place to the next, always aware that the law was searching for them. Their time together was surprisingly short. From 1930 to 1934, just 4 years, their partnership progressed from a chance meeting in West Dallas to a national fascination. Their final chapter unfolded on a quiet Louisiana back road in May 1934, when authorities, after months of careful planning, brought an end to the couple's long flight from capture. Although their lives were brief, the legacy of Bonnie and Clyde has stretched far beyond their years. Their story has been retold in films, books, and documentaries, each adding new layers to the public's understanding of who they were. Today, their names remain permanently linked in American history, representing both the hardships of the Great Depression and the enduring power of myth-making in the modern era. January 1930, Bonnie and Clyde meet. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow's story began in early 1930 when the two met for the first time in West Dallas. Bonnie was only 19 and still legally married, but she was living apart from her husband, who was serving a long sentence. This complicated situation did little to discourage her growing interest in Clyde. Their connection formed quickly, shaped by shared frustrations, similar upbringings, and the challenges of the Great Depression. Not long after they became acquainted, Clyde was taken into custody on charges related to theft and repeated run-ins with the law. Yet even during this early separation, their bond did not weaken. Letters passed between them, and Clyde even crafted a handmade ring for Bonnie while confined, a symbol of a relationship that was already becoming central to both of their lives. In February 1930, Clyde entered Eastham Prison Farm, a notoriously harsh Texas labor facility known for difficult working conditions and strict oversight. Life inside Eastham was grueling, with prisoners assigned to agricultural labor from dawn to dusk. For Clyde, who had already lived through years of economic hardship, the environment made his sentence feel even heavier. Bonnie, determined to help him, became involved in a plan to assist his return to freedom. Historical accounts indicate that she found a way to provide him with a tool that allowed him to leave the facility temporarily. However, the attempt was short-lived. Clyde was soon brought back into custody, and his sentence continued. He remained in the prison system for nearly 2 additional years. Clyde was finally granted parole in February 1932, emerging from Eastham a changed and increasingly determined young man. Historians have noted that his time inside deeply influenced the choices he made afterward, shaping not only his own path, but also the direction of his partnership with Bonnie. The Barrow Gang is formed. Clyde Barrow's time behind bars did little to deter him from continuing the lifestyle he had already begun before his imprisonment. In fact, when he was released, his determination to return to the world of quick money and constant travel seemed even stronger. With limited opportunities available during the Great Depression and a reputation that made steady employment difficult, Clyde gravitated back toward familiar patterns. After regaining his freedom in 1932, he gradually assembled a loosely organized group of companions who drifted in and out of his circle. This early version of what would later be known as the Barrow Gang focused on roadside thefts, small store robberies, and occasional bank attempts, reflecting the desperation many young people felt during the era. While their actions drew public attention, their day-to-day existence was far from glamorous. The group relied on unreliable vehicles, sparse resources, and constant movement to avoid being taken into custody. Historical reports from the early 1930s connect several members of the group to incidents in which individuals, both everyday citizens and law officers, were harmed. Although details from this period are often inconsistent or exaggerated due to sensational newspaper reporting, these events contributed significantly to the way Bonnie and Clyde were viewed by the public and by authorities. On April 19, 1932, the group experienced one of its earliest major setbacks when Bonnie Parker herself was taken into custody. She had accompanied one of Clyde's associates during an attempted store robbery in Texas, an incident that ended with Bonnie being held while the others escaped. During her time in the local jail, Bonnie occupied herself by writing poetry, some of which offered glimpses into her imagination, personal struggles, and her perception of life on the road. These writings later became part of the broader folklore surrounding her, adding complexity to her public image. After spending roughly 2 months detained, Bonnie was released. Rather than distancing herself from Clyde or the uncertainties of life on the run, she reunited with him almost immediately. This decision further solidified the partnership that would make them household names across the United States. The group slays a civilian store owner. Although the Barrow Gang is often remembered for its attempts at bank robberies, many of their earliest incidents involve small-town businesses. During one such episode in April 1932, a group member confronted a Texas jeweler named John Bucher during a failed store holdup. Bucher lost his life during the encounter, and his wife later identified Clyde Barrow as one of the individuals present. Incidents like this, widely covered in newspapers, helped shape the public image of the gang long before their later, more well-known escapades. By the summer of 1932, the group's activities shifted noticeably. Their movements across state lines brought them into frequent contact with local authorities who were unfamiliar with their patterns and unable to anticipate their next steps. On August 5, 1932, while traveling through Oklahoma, Clyde Barrow and his associate Raymond Hamilton were approached by a sheriff and a deputy during what appeared to be a routine inquiry. According to contemporary reports such as those published in the Daily News, the situation escalated rapidly. The officers were overpowered, and one later passed away due to the encounter, while the other survived with injuries. For law enforcement agencies across the Midwest and South, this incident marked a turning point. It signaled that the Barrow Group, once considered small-time offenders, had become a far more urgent concern. Over the next 2 years, interactions between the Barrow Gang and various law officers continued to intensify. While some situations resulted in serious harm, others ended very differently. There were several occasions when Bonnie, Clyde, and their associates reportedly detained officers temporarily, only to release them unharmed once they secured enough time to leave the area. These mixed accounts contributed to the complicated and often contradictory mythology surrounding the couple. The group engages in multiple standoffs. By 1933, the Barrow Gang's notoriety was growing rapidly. Between April and July of that year, Bonnie and Clyde found themselves in multiple confrontations with law officers, each incident drawing more attention from the public and the press. In early April, Clyde's older brother, Buck Barrow, and Buck's wife, Blanche, joined the group. This addition changed the dynamic of the gang. Buck was older, more level-headed, and often hoped to persuade Clyde to leave their risky lifestyle behind. Blanche, meanwhile, kept detailed memories of their time together, accounts that later became valuable primary sources for historians. The group settled temporarily in an upstairs apartment in Joplin, Missouri. Their intention had been to rest quietly and avoid detection, but their activities drew suspicion. Neighbors reported frequent visitors, late-night gatherings, and loud noises. On April 13th, officers arrived to investigate. A tense standoff followed, and during the chaotic departure that ensued, 2 officers lost their lives. Though the gang managed to get away, the incident dramatically increased law enforcement pressure in the surrounding states. A few months later in July, the group attempted to remain unnoticed by renting cabins in Platte City, Missouri. Small-town life, however, made it difficult to hide. Blanche's modern clothing, particularly her trousers and riding boots, stood out in a conservative community where women rarely dressed in such fashion. She later wrote that people watched her closely, reacting as though she was capable of reckless behavior at any moment simply because of her appearance. Local officers became curious about the new arrivals. When one officer knocked on their cabin door to make inquiries, Blanche or Bonnie responded through the door that they needed a moment to get dressed. A sudden exchange followed between the group and the officers outside. The 4 members of the Barrow Gang fled the area once again, but both Buck and Blanche sustained injuries during their escape. This event marked the beginning of the end for Buck and Blanche, whose involvement would soon come to a difficult conclusion. In April 1933, another moment significantly elevated Bonnie and Clyde's national profile, this time not through an encounter with authorities, but through the discovery of personal items. When officers searched the abandoned apartment in Joplin, they found a camera with undeveloped film, along with Bonnie's handwritten poems. After the film was developed, newspapers quickly shared the photographs. The images showed Bonnie and Clyde posing playfully, Bonnie with a cigar, Clyde leaning confidently against a Ford V8. These pictures did not reflect their harsh daily reality, but they appealed to an American public hungry for larger-than-life figures during the hardships of the Great Depression. Within days, the images spread across the country, transforming Bonnie and Clyde from regional fugitives into national celebrity figures. Many Americans were captivated by the idea of a daring couple living boldly outside society's expectations, even though the actual story behind the photographs was far more complex. The group takes 2 people against their will. Although Bonnie and Clyde were often associated with dangerous encounters during their time on the run, there were also several moments when they treated people far more gently than their reputation suggested. In some cases, instead of harming individuals who crossed their path, they simply took control of a vehicle or situation, kept the people with them for a short period, and later released them without lasting harm. 2 well-known examples were H.D. Darby, an undertaker by trade, and his friend Sophie Stone. The pair were traveling in Louisiana when Bonnie and Clyde unexpectedly took possession of Darby's car and brought them along for the ride. The initial experience was frightening for the 2 passengers, who had no way of knowing what might happen next. However, as the journey continued, both Bonnie and Clyde adopted a calmer demeanor. Accounts describe the atmosphere shifting from fear to uneasy conversation. By the time the group reached Arkansas, the couple allowed Darby and Stone to leave unharmed. Clyde even offered them $5 as a gesture of goodwill, and jokingly told Darby that if anything ever happened to him, he could be the one to take care of his final arrangements. Incidents like this contributed to the complicated, often contradictory image the public held of the pair. During the same period in 1933, the group experienced a serious setback unrelated to law enforcement. Their lifestyle required constant driving, long hours on rough roads, frequently in fast overloaded cars. A major accident seemed almost unavoidable. In June 1933, Clyde lost control of their vehicle on a rural stretch of road, sending it off course and leaving nearly everyone inside with injuries. Bonnie suffered the most. She received significant burns and deep abrasions on several parts of her body, including her legs, arms, and face. Blanche Barrow later described the aftermath in vivid detail, recalling that Bonnie was in extreme distress and appeared gravely hurt. The injuries were so serious that members of the group feared she might not make it through the night. Despite the severity of her condition, Bonnie gradually recovered. Still, she never fully regained her earlier physical strength. Many historians believe that from this point onward, she relied heavily on Clyde for mobility, often being carried or supported during their travels. This lesser-known detail reveals how difficult life on the road truly was for the couple and how much their public image differed from the harsh realities they faced daily. Bonnie and Clyde escape. Another shootout. Only a short time after escaping the tense encounter in Platte City, Missouri, Bonnie, Clyde, Buck, and Blanche once again found themselves facing law officers. Constant travel made it difficult for them to stay hidden, and their injuries from earlier confrontations only added to the strain. Seeking a place to rest, the group hid at an abandoned amusement park in Iowa, hoping the deserted grounds would offer some protection. Their refuge didn't last long. Before they could regain their strength, officers discovered their location. Bonnie and Clyde managed to slip away in the confusion, continuing their pattern of moving quickly across state lines to avoid being held. Buck and Blanche, however, were unable to flee. Buck had already been hurt during a previous escape, and the new confrontation left him severely injured. He was taken to a hospital under guard, while Blanche stayed beside him and was taken into custody. Buck's injuries proved too serious for recovery, and he passed away shortly thereafter. Blanche later shared that she had originally hesitated to join Clyde and Bonnie on the run. Her choice came from a sense of devotion to her husband rather than a desire to participate in the gang's activities. Still, during their time together, she grew close to Bonnie and Clyde, forming emotional ties that were difficult to sever. When questioned by authorities, she refused to provide information that could lead to the couple's capture. Blanche served 6 years in prison, after which she remarried and lived much more quietly than the dramatic years she spent on the road. Her memoirs and later interviews became valuable sources for historians trying to understand what life inside the Barrow circle truly looked like, offering a rare first-hand perspective from someone who had seen both the personal and the practical sides of the group's journey. By early 1934, Bonnie and Clyde were focused not only on their own survival, but also on helping friends who had been taken into custody. Several of Clyde's early companions were being held at Eastham Prison Farm, the same place where Clyde himself had been confined years earlier. Among them was Raymond Hamilton, one of Clyde's original partners. On January 16, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde coordinated an effort to free Hamilton and several other inmates. Historical accounts describe a sudden intervention that allowed the prisoners to leave the work detail they had been assigned to in a rural field. The event drew significant attention, partly because Eastham was known for harsh labor conditions, and partly because it showed how far Bonnie and Clyde were willing to go to support those they considered part of their circle. In early April 1934, a pivotal event dramatically changed how the nation viewed Bonnie and Clyde. On April 2nd, 2 Texas officers approached the couple's car during what was meant to be a routine observation. The encounter quickly escalated, resulting in the officers losing their lives. Until then, much of the public had viewed Bonnie and Clyde as daring, rebellious figures, romantic outsiders defying a harsh economic system. But this incident shifted public sentiment. Newspapers that once glamorized their escapades began portraying them as far more dangerous, marking a turning point in how Americans perceived the pair. Bonnie and Clyde are taken out in a police ambush. By late spring, law enforcement agencies across multiple states had intensified their efforts to bring the couple in. Their movements, once unpredictable, were now being closely monitored. On May 23, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde were traveling together along a quiet rural highway in Louisiana. Officers had received a credible tip regarding their route and organized a coordinated plan to intercept them. A team of 6 lawmen waited concealed along the roadside, prepared for the couple's arrival. When Bonnie and Clyde approached, the officers acted quickly to stop their vehicle. According to one of the officers present, Frank Hamer, the couple never had the opportunity to respond. Although both Bonnie and Clyde were holding weapons, there was no indication they attempted to use them. This moment brought an end to their long flight from capture and concluded one of the most widely followed criminal manhunts of the 20th century. News of their deaths spread rapidly across the country. Their story, already the subject of intense public fascination, reached its emotional peak when thousands gathered to see the couple's final arrangements. Their bodies were returned to Texas, where local communities were eager to witness the conclusion of a saga that had captivated the nation. Despite their close partnership in life, Bonnie and Clyde were not buried together. Their families chose separate services based on their own beliefs and wishes. Bonnie's funeral drew an especially large crowd. An estimated 20,000 people waited in long lines outside the funeral home for a final glimpse of the young woman who had become both a symbol and a mystery in Depression-era America. Over the decades, Bonnie and Clyde's story has continued to inspire writers, historians, and filmmakers. Among the most influential books on the couple is Jeff Ginn's Go Down Together, The True Untold Story of Bonnie and Clyde, 2009, which offers a deeply researched, humanizing account. Other works, such as Paul Schneider's Bonnie and Clyde, The Lives Behind the Legend, and Blanche Caldwell. Barrow's memoir, My Life with Bonnie and Clyde, provide valuable first-hand context and differing perspectives on their journey. The couple has also been depicted extensively in documentaries. PBS featured them in a 2017 American Experience episode, presenting archival material and interviews with historians. Another documentary, Bonnie and Clyde, The Whole Story, 2016, examined early records and eyewitness accounts to distinguish historical truth from myth. Cinema has played a major role in shaping their legacy as well. The iconic 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde, starring Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty, redefined how their story was told and became a landmark piece of American filmmaking. Its influence extended far beyond its own genre, inspiring future classics such as The Godfather and The Departed. Later adaptations, including a 1992 film and Netflix's 2019 release, The Highwayman, continued exploring their complicated legacy, each adding new interpretations to a story that remains one of the most captivating in American history. The story of Bonnie and Clyde is one of the most complicated chapters in American criminal history, filled with hardship, desperation, ambition, and a myth-making machine that never quite shut off. For decades, the pair have been wrapped in layers of legend, portrayed as rebellious young lovers racing across the country with a flair for danger and a taste for adventure. So as you close this chapter on America's most infamous outlaw couple, ask yourself, was it the danger, the rebellion, or the mystery that kept their story alive this long? And what other forgotten tales from the American past are waiting to be uncovered? If you enjoyed diving into the real story behind Bonnie and Clyde, leave a comment below and tell me which notorious figure or Old West mystery you want to explore next. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more untold truths, hidden history, and eye-opening stories from the American Old West and beyond.